thank you, all of you, for being here, and thank my team for helping me get here during this Mercury retrograde, and with also 4 other planets retrograde, mind you. So it's been a bit of an adventure, but I've been wanting to do this for so long. This is an answered prayer. I'm so grateful. These are my favorite topics. And so, yes, so welcome. This is part of a series I've been doing for the last year, mainly because of things my clients were bringing me. My business, turns out, is really reflective of what's going on in the world. I never would have imagined that when I first hung out my shingle. It's totally logical, but it didn't occur to me. And so frequently my business changes because the world changes. And when COVID hit, right when all the boomers were aging, and the timing of that was amazing, but my business changed, and suddenly I'm doing a lot of families, helping a lot of families make transitions, primarily with aging and older parents, but it's very complicated, and technically it's going on our whole life, right? And we don't think that way here. And so that's how I got here. And so this series, or this event tonight, is epic and awesome for me because I get to add in the medicine. I get to add in the ritual. I get to add in the things that I can't talk about at the chamber or visit Santa Barbara. Now, God bless them. Those people love me and I love them, but this is not their conversation yet. And so being able to have it in rooms like this sets the stage that we just keep doing our advocacy and we keep doing our work, and hopefully we're leaving the world better for the next generations, or at least the people a little younger than us. Yeah. Okay. So I always like to start with a welcome and a thank you, because sometimes people who come here to these talks have had to overcome some things to get here. And so I want to just acknowledge that. I always do a thank you also to the guides, guardians, angels, ancestors, the people who inform our daily, the souls on the other side that inform the daily lives. We are living the results of our ancestors' choices. And yeah, some of them, we all have a few criminals back there in the family tree, but we had, especially here, we had people who worked really hard in our ancestral lines to get us here. And so I always like to thank and acknowledge that. So there's that. I'm heavy duty on like gratitude practice, and I know it's annoying, but it's like a thing. It's, trust me, someday you'll wrap your head around it and you'll love it. It's a good thing. Okay. The other thing I like to do is dedicate the evening to the folks who blazed the trails for us. And some of it's ancestral, some of it's people who are no longer with us. Carl Jung, Sasha Shulgin, all those shaman and priests and pastors and teachers and whatnot. It feels particularly poignant for me now, given the times that we live in. But the other factor, and with me there's always at least one other factor, is tonight. Tonight is a really special night. Tonight is the lunar Samhain. Now, because we are on a Gregorian calendar rather than a lunar calendar, the cross-quarter days don't always line up with, so the Samhain is Halloween, and some years they're on the same day, and some years they're far apart. And this year they were far apart. And so when Jacob and I were talking about doing this, we had kind of wanted to have it as close to Halloween as possible because that's the most sacred time of the year. It's when the harvest season ends. It's when we get to begin to assess what we've done in the last year and what worked and what didn't and why and what we want to do differently so that we can create our New Year's resolutions and whatnot, goals for the next fiscal year from a more informed place. But then when I looked at the calendar, I was like, Oh, Scorpio new moon, lunar Samhain, Wednesday, the 19th. Yay. This is what we're going to do. So I want to take just a minute and acknowledge the moment. So I'd like you to just like close your eyes and take a deep breath and step back and use a little bit of a wider angle lens and allow yourself to acknowledge not only the ancestors and the teachers and trailblazers that came before, but the friends, family, colleagues, co-workers who made a difference in our lives who aren't here now. Because the Halloween sound, All Saints Day, All Souls Day, Day of the Dead, is all about that. And it's all about bringing greater connection to those souls and consciousness of them and what they can do for us and what we can do for them. So just take a minute and think about souls that made a difference for you. And just in your mind's eye, in your heart, say thank you. Okay. Back to the power of now. One of the things that I've learned when I talk is that I will have invariably a wide set of brackets. I've got people with virtually no experience. I've got people with all kinds of experience because they work in these fields or they teach or whatever. And then I've got people who've had really powerful, like amazingly graced synchronicitous experiences. And then I've got people who are struggling to understand what they've been through. And so what I do periodically is just kind of check in and see where people are so that I can address your needs and so that I'm not talking over your head, but I'm also not boring you. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So how many of you have gone through a process with a beloved elder who, through the aging, through the elder care, navigating, managing elder care, and then helping them pass? Oh yeah, good. That's like half of you. Epic. Good. Okay. So of those of you who've done that, how many of you still feel like you carry some pain or trauma around how it all went down? Yeah, that's about half. That's common. We don't do this well in America. We don't prepare our families. And so that's part of why all this came about. It's part of why we're doing this, and why we hope to do more of it. So how many of you got to the other side of it and then felt like like you had to work hard to reconcile the trauma or the pain from it? Yeah. Because that's how it is. So because that's so normal, I want to just make sure everybody gets that, because there's so much pain and there's so much shame and there's so much stigma around having these conversations and working through our own issues so that we can at least participate better with our crazy families, even if we might not be able to move the needle very far. We have cleaned up some of our own karma and left less of a mess for the future. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So that's where I'm coming from. And the reason we grieve, the reason it's so hard, has to do with love. If we didn't love, no matter how dysfunctional, no matter how weird, if we didn't love them, we wouldn't care. Right? And so that's a piece I think that people miss a lot. We need to make sure that we're not beating ourselves up too bad for this. It's like, I'm doing this because I care, and yeah, I need to learn some better techniques. Let's just leave it at that. Let's just commit to that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. I'm so happy when this works because I can't do this at home. And yeah. And so thank you. Thanks for your help. Again, because we have such a diversity of experiences in the room, if at any point you have a question, I don't want you to save it to the end. Raise your hand and ask me. Or if you have a particularly powerful or poignant experience that could make a difference for someone else in the room, it's the whole 12-step thing about experience, strength, and hope. That's what we share. That's what we share. So I give you permission to do that. The first thing I want to do is talk real quick about some definitions, just so we're all on the same page. And it may seem unnecessary, but in my field, around some of these words, you can really alienate people of different faiths if you don't use the right word. Like I sent a very practicing Jewish woman to my absolute favorite past life regression therapist, the best guy I've met nationwide. Like, he's a miracle worker. And because he used the word Christ consciousness, she didn't hear another thing after that word. And so at my age, I'm shocked by that, but it's a thing and it's real. And so we work with it, right? And so I just need you to know that I use the G word for God, not because of any particular belief. It's because I'm a very impatient person. I have an Aries rising and an exalted Mars, and saying higher power or the organizing forces of the universe is just too much. It's a bridge too far. So if everybody's good with that, that's the word I'm going to use. If we need to do something else, tell me now. Yeah, before I piss you off. Yeah. Okay. So there's that. The next one has to do with grace. Now, this is different faiths define it differently. And some of it, the biggest distinctions for me have to do with the concept of you have to earn it, or God simply gives it to you because we are his children and he loves us. And so for me, sometimes it's important. Sometimes the how you get there is important from like a real like theological perspective, but sometimes it's really not. For me, what's the most important is that you know what it feels like in your mind and your heart and your body when you're in it and it's happening to you. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. The only place where I think beliefs and actions matter is this. And it's more of a roadmap for living. I had a colleague a long, long time ago who used to always talk about rat living. And yeah. And so from where I stand after doing this business for 35 years, this is the basic roadmap. This is the basic roadmap. If you want to make sure that you are cultivating the best possible energies coming back to you. And again, I came to past life stuff late, but it was really powerful. I had a bleed through experience in Jerusalem when I was 17 years old. And I was standing there on the hill overlooking the city. And I was just admiring it. And then this breeze came up and suddenly I smell horses, like lots of horses, where there's like horse sweat and horse poo and then unwashed humans. And I look down and I'm wearing chainmail and the Teutonic tunic. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, no one else is seeing this. I'm stone cold sober. It's broad daylight. And I need to just keep this in my little heart until I can sort it out. And indeed I did. And then I went to college and I studied comparative religions because I really, really, really wanted to know what that was about. But anyway, the big thing for me is that you have your own personal kind of code of ethics, way of being, how you do things that you are clear on. And then if you're part of a family, the family has that too, because that's how That's going to be important moving forward when mama starts losing her marbles. It's how we talk to each other, how we help each other, how we take care of each other, that sort of thing. Does that make sense? Yeah. Does anybody have a particular moment or feeling or gauge they use to tell when they know they feel they're absolutely certain they're in grace? Yeah.
I get a bunch of weird synchronicities will happen. That's a little slow.
That is the most textbook Jungian thing. Yeah. I also like to usually throw out, this is one of the places I do not agree with all of their philosophies and theories, but the Abraham Hicks modality, they talk about being in the vortex. For me, grace is the vortex where those synchronicities, those good things are happening. You're in the flow state. There's movement and it's good and it feels good in your body and you feel better about things. You have a more uplifted affect. But she always talks about it in terms of the choices you have in any moment. You have, if you're in the vortex, if you're in that flow state, stay there. Do whatever you have to do to stay there. And if you're out of the vortex, your only job is to figure out what's off and how to get back in it. And that's, again, where other spiritual practices, this stuff, but also like tarot cards or like just pulling a card, asking the universe to tell me how to get back in because it's not happening in my head. And so, or looking at transits or stuff like that. There's a lot of tools for that. Does that make sense so far? Cool. Any questions? Cool. All right. Yes. Oh, we did that. Okay. All right. The last definition we're going to do is literally called a good death. Now, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, when I started doing this stuff, that was not a term. We did not use that term. That was not a thing at all. And we were just trying to get things to not be ugly. And it's now, to my utter gratitude, it is now not only a thing, but it's a goal. It's not only a goal, but in order to reach that goal, it's one of those things that you kind of have to reverse engineer. And you have to start way earlier on. When I was growing up, the only thing my parents did was make sure they had money, insurance, and documentation, the will, the legal power of attorney, the medical power of attorney, if there was a trust, if a trust was relevant to have a trust. And now, again, the passing of the greatest generation really brought this to the fore. And I may get choked up about this. Right about the time these folks really started to pass in numbers, our government made a series of really unfortunate choices. They changed Medicare for the first time in like 30 or 40 years. They took away the money for elders, the people who fought and bled for freedom and democracy. So they couldn't die in a hospital anymore. And they had to go home to die before there was really hospice. This was 2006, 2007. And that changed my business on a dime. It used to be like people would call me after the death, asking to talk to the soul of the beloved dead. Every now and then I'd get called in to help a family when someone with a terminal diagnosis and a very limited amount of time to live wasn't embracing it. And they were still doing that fighting cancer thing. And a number of times, the only times I got called in to do anything other than mediumship before Medicare Part B changed in 2006, 2007, was to help the person who was dying make peace so that the family could embrace them and love them out, you know, the way we're supposed to do. And, but Medicare changed, and then suddenly I'm getting these panic phone calls from people because Dad's been dying in the living room for the last 3 months, and for the last 2 weeks he's had the death rattle, and it's very unsettling. It's very it's not bad and it's not wrong, but if you haven't, it's an indicator that it's near and that the end is near. But if you haven't had the training and you don't know what you're dealing with, it's a freak out. It is not easy to be present with at all. And so I started to get people calling me about that and asking for help and involvement, and for one reason or another, depending on the thing. And that changed. And then the good death stuff and a lot of the innovations we've had in end-of-life care, hospice, death midwifery, has come just really in the last 20 years, 19, 18 years. Not, wait, no, I don't do math. Yeah, a long time ago, a couple decades. It's good now, but we have all kinds of resources about this. These are just some of them. And we have a definition. Right. Yeah. It's always really good, again, to be clear about terms and definitions. And what I love about this one is the word free. We want to be free on all levels, not just the person that's dying, but the family unit as a whole. If it's not done right, the elder care and the dying portion can bankrupt a family. If it's not done right, it puts the family at extraordinary legal and financial risk. And that's not cool. That is not cool. I am all about families, democracy, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if, like with most American families, we confuse drama with love. We confuse drama with caring. We confuse drama with media, news coverage, governance. Like, we do drama like pretty much no other nation. And we've had a mental health crisis here for decades, and it's not better. And so it's real easy for things to go sideways on a good day. Right? Like, think about Thanksgiving dinner. We're just trying to get together and share about gratitude. Can we do that? No. We're going to fight about football or politics or, what's on the menu or whatever. And so, making things, again, this gets back to the reverse engineering. We have to be clear earlier on how we're holding this in our hearts basically all our lives. In ancient cultures, they were not as separated from death as we are now. And it was a part of life. There was rituals and ceremonies and ways of being that were built in that we're desperately trying to get back. The good news is that we're getting there, and there's a lot of people in this room who are fighting on the front lines with me on this, and it's huge. So anyway, any questions on this? Okay. So we're going to break it down a little further and get into some granular stuff. As you can see, there are a number of factors we want to factor in, and it's really important to have balance. It's really important to have balance. And again, that involves talking to my family. Yeah, which is so easy, especially if there's any kind of history, abuse, trauma, yada, yada, yada. And so that's what always leads us back to healing, different healing modalities. And if you're really wanting to get deep and with your process and expedite it, that's where the medicines come in and some of the different methods I'm going to talk about. Okay. Any questions so far? This is a quote from one of my favorite trailblazers in the industry, Frank Ostaseski. He actually taught here right before COVID. Hospice and visiting nurses had the foresight to do a series of really brilliant educational programs. And they brought Frank here. They brought BJ Miller here. They brought Joan Halifax. Yeah, it was amazing. And I was just doing it because I was like, hey, look what they're doing. And then a year later, it was like, oh, grace. This was grace. This was a synchronicitous life-changing thing. but he's the only one I've heard say it that succinctly, that it's absolutely insane to think that at your end, you can do all the things that need to get done. You know, we tend to not want to talk about things that are unpleasant. We tend to not want to address or try and deal with things that are unpleasant. And if you wait till the end, basically what happens is you lose your ability to choose. You know, if you wait till you already have a dementia diagnosis, you can't modify your will. You can't make one. There's just things we're not taught to think about. And so this is the frame that the rest of it sits in. Okay, so that leaves us. This is alternately the yucky stuff and the fun stuff, right? This is where it's like, okay, we have to figure out how to solve the problem. And this is where I'm going to throw some leadership stuff at you. This is where the hardcore material playing business stuff intersects with the woo-woo. And so, bear with me. This is the nuts and bolts that we fight over. This is the nuts and bolts that we have to duke out. And we have to find a way to duke it out and be happy with what we can do, because it's really rare. There's no perfect. And like in my situation, when my father was dying, my sister was the executor and the legal and medical power of attorney, but Dad didn't ask her if she was willing and able to do that, and she couldn't. And on the one hand, it made it easier for me because I didn't have to have the fight. You know, I just handled it. And she never questioned, she never argued, she never challenged, she never asked for anything. And so on the one hand, you know, it was easier than a lot of families have. But on the other hand, it was a heck of a burden, like being the only one. And I ended up hiring a care management company because they didn't want to leave the city where they were in Phoenix, and I wasn't moving to Phoenix. Yeah. So my husband's a surfer, right? Getting him away from the beach. And so, anywho, we have to figure out how constructively to address the older issues and create a new consciousness, a new way of being, new game plan, new ground rules. As Cesar, the dog whisperer, says, rules, boundaries, and limitations. Yeah. Okay. And the good news is, and this is another place now where hospice is overlapping with psychology that I am really loving right now. They put this whole aging elder death window thing in the context of our individual hero's journey. It gets us out of victim, and it makes it so clear what to do with what you can do and how to deal with the things you can't control, which is the actions and feelings and opinions of other people. And so if you just keep hitting it, do what you can for you. And again, the leadership portion of this is Stephen Covey. And this is one of my favorite Stephen Covey contradictions, because it's very, on the surface, it's like, dude, and then you listen, you play with it, you work with it, you listen, and it's like, oh, that is exactly what that is. But he says that a group can only go as fast as its fastest member, and a group can only go as fast as its slowest member, which means the faster guys have to figure out how to work more effectively with the slower guys. And that's where, you want to hit them with the bat, it's like, come on, get with the program. Let's go. And that's not what's going to work. So then that throws you back into your own psyche, your own soul, the reasons why you incarnated this time. Why did you incarnate to these folks? There's a reason. It's important to know about it. It's very, very helpful. It's often less than pleasant. But again, there's love there. There's love there. There's love that exists between us as souls and existed before this lifetime and exists after. And so the bottom line is, how do we not make it worse? If you're holding steady, if that's the best you can do, and you've given it everything you have, good for you. You didn't make it worse. If you can make it a little better, if you can move the ball a little further down the field, even better. But it's just about not making it worse and not making more bad karma for you or anybody else. And more than once, my prayer has been, help me to do whatever I have to do so that I don't have to come back to this again with this soul. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been my North Star a lot. There's stuff, it's so bad you can't, it's so big, so complicated, you can't do it all this lifetime, and you can just move it down the field. And that's great. But there's times when you can definitely discharge that debt, and it's like, if you can, do it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Questions? Cool. All right. But there's an intersection. There's the universal stuff that we all have to go through. There's your family and community and where they go with it. And then there's your personal hero's journey, what this moment is bringing you. As Rock Razam says, what is emerging from this emergency? There's always something yummy and good in here, if you can just stay calm and grounded and present and open to it. And on that note, a lot of you have heard me say this. For someone who's psychic, I spend an awful lot of time arguing with the folks who are here to help me. Like 75% of the time they show up, they're saying this, that, the other thing. I'm like, no, and no. Or even like 2 years ago, I had a whole bunch of friends die at the same time. And I was just like, hey, could you give me 6 months? I just would really like a break. I need to grieve before, like, I don't feel like I'm doing justice to these other people that I love. And yet there's this constant like conveyor belt of dying boomers and this is a small town and whatnot. And they laughed at me and they were like, no, no, honey, this is not the point. And I said, how about 3 months? And they said, no. And I said, how about 6 weeks? And they're like, okay, we can do that. But like, you can argue and sometimes you can negotiate, you know, but not always. And if you're doing it right later, you can have a sense of humor on both sides. Okay. So how do we get there from here? This is just a brief summary of the things I use the most. And I know other professionals or people who've been doing this. The tricky part for me is like, within this field, you have different people with different wheelhouses. Like my friend Brittany has more legal experience with that stuff. And so from the Venn diagram of my career, the history, the astrology, the psychic stuff, the business stuff, business financial stuff, even the political stuff, it's like, this is the stuff I use the most with clients and community members. And so if you want to take a picture of that, that's great. I didn't do any collateral handouts for this one. If you want this or any of the bits, email me. Don't hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to send it to you. From this list, I'm going to talk about just a couple of the ones that I think are the most important. The other thing I want to say is that there are way more modalities out there, especially in a town like this. Santa Barbara has had healing as a huge part of its economic background since the 1880s during the tuberculosis catastrophes, where doctors were sending people out here for the climate. And that's part of how our tourism grew here. It started out as resort tourism, sanitarian. Yeah. So just know, in a place like this, you want it, you can find it. Everything from drum circles to Reiki to Lomi Lomi to family constellation to somatic to exorcisms. You know, it's all here. It is all here. That is one of the blessings about this town. And different tools work better for different people, and different tools work better at different times of life or for different catastrophes. And so just know, this is by no means comprehensive. This is just the stuff I use the most. This is the biggest component of my toolbox. Any questions? Okay. All right. I love this, just straight up. And it ticks all the boxes for me. Everything from history to shamanism and psychology and medicine and all these things. Everything lives here. And so the important thing to know about journaling is that everybody says, yeah, go journal, but they don't tell you how, and they don't tell you why. And there's different kinds. And again, looking at it from a historical perspective, in the 1700s and 1800s, wealthy, educated, elite people were, it was a common thing to keep diaries. They were called diarists. And Queen Victoria was one of them. Oscar Wilde had an amazing one, as you might imagine. And it was everything from, well, today I did this, to emotions and feelings, to historical events or things they witnessed or whatever. And so that was the stage that Jung stepped onto. And about the time he was separating out from Freud over basically sex, he was like, sexuality isn't everything. We need to be focused on the unconscious, and how do we make the unconscious conscious? And God bless him for that. But one of the things he did was he journaled intensively for about 20 years, and he called them his black books because they were in black leather bound. It was black leather bound diaries. And then what he did differently was that he started going back over his old journals. And over time, he was looking at progressions, evolutions of things. Hey, look, this issue doesn't bother me anymore. This, yay me, you know, this one is somewhat better, but still needs some fine tuning. And here are my thoughts about that. And then this is still the bane of my existence. He turned those reviews and that evolutionary process into the Red Book. That's the thing they do not tell you about the Red Book. The Red Book is a culmination of decades of journaling and inner wisdom that he learned how to develop with himself, for himself, between the different trainings and talents that he had, the different other cultures that he studied. And then he literally could identify some of his spirit guides. And Philemon is the big one. And so just know, it's a very helpful thing to figure out how to play with that. If you have old journals, it's a good thing to go back and look, so you can, especially on a bad day, it's like, oh, look how far I've come. Yay. You know, because nobody's going to say that. The other thing that I use journaling for is the pre-journey identification of priorities and goals. I also take like really copious notes during, and then I use both of those in the integration afterwards. Because oh gosh, I forget which culture it is, but one facilitator who studied a lot of Plains Indian and South American cultures talked about how the 12 days after a journey are absolutely crucial, and especially the first 4 days. And that, I think, I do believe that, but also I think it's really, 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 really important to go back and review your notes from what you did every one of those days, even if it's just for 20 minutes, because something will become clearer. And not only in terms of what you downloaded or what you shifted, but then what that means in your daily life now. Does that make sense?
Could you go into that maybe just a little bit more? Like,
Okay. One of them is, one of the things I see the most is this feeling of separateness, right? We're always trying to address how to get back to the garden, proverbially speaking. And what often happens is you have this epiphany in the journey state about what gets in the way of your receiving that connection. And often you have this moment of like, oh, it was there all along. I was just afraid of it because this thing that happened in 1780 or when I was 6 or something like that. And then if you go back and review whatever you could remember, Actually, I'm going to say this differently. I'm a big fan of MDMA because it's very much easier to keep track of your process when you're in it, and then also to then extrapolate out those journals. And I really encourage people to keep, like a nurse in a hospital calls it progress notes, at 10:15 we did this and I felt that. And then, or at 10:15 I turned the radio off and I could hear the wind. And I realized that my neighborhood loves me, the nature, the big trees in my world, they are there and they can nourish and sustain me often when people can't, stuff like that. And then you keep track of that during the journey. And then afterwards, you go back and you flesh out because there's usually more that you can remember. And then also it's like, oh, and then on my walk today, I remembered that. And then like 3 dogs and the neighborhood hawk were right there. You know what I mean? And it just kind of anchors in, reinforces the thing you have been discounting, the thing that's been there all along. And it's not always that simple, but that's one of the most accessible examples. Does that make sense?
absolutely.
Yeah, great. Anything else? Okay. Where did I leave off? Okay, journaling. All right, what's my next fun thing? Oh, this, yeah. This rocks my world. This absolutely rocks my world. How many of you are familiar with the Wheel of the Year? Yeah, most people aren't. And it is one of the most key fundamental underpinnings of the world society, straight up. When mankind, and this, I can't even begin to fathom how many hundreds, thousands, millions of years this was going on before we did anything about it, because humans often don't do much. Yeah, we think about it and then we don't. But one of the things that happened over time was mankind, before there was writing, first started to notice the changes of the seasons, the solstices, the equinoxes, the halfway points in between, those 6-week periods that are now called the cross-quarter days. And that influenced some of the first structures ever found. Stonehenge, Avebury, I always say this wrong, Göbekli Tepe, the one in Turkey. A lot of the pyramids from the different, there's ancient observatories in China, but they started keeping track of it because it made their lives better. They could keep track of where the herds were and where to, when to follow them and where to follow them and that kind of thing. And then it was just a short leak, a hop, skip, and a jump over several thousand years to where they were, it was instrumental in helping mankind move from being exclusively hunter-gatherers to settled people in society who farmed and raised herds. Because you had to keep track of when to plant and when to reap. And then that became the foundation for the economic, financial, business model of Europe in the Middle Ages. The quarter days, the cross-quarter days, when the landlords collected their taxes from the tenants. And then that became the foundation for our current fiscal year. And so this is the foundation that everything sits in for me. The astrology piece is derivative of this, and yes, I'm a big fan. But like where we are in the wheel of the year, I think really needs more education, investment focus. Like right now, I just did this on Richard Dugan's podcast yesterday. He asked me when the veil starts thinning, and I was like, technically, Lammas, the beginning of the harvest season, which is late July, early August. And it's the thinnest. It gets thinner still at the equinox, and then it is technically the thinnest now at Halloween, Samhain, Day of the Dead, that kind of stuff. But again, because we're on a Gregorian calendar and not a lunar one, those Samhain days, the cross-quarter days don't line up. And the solstices and the equinoxes are not on the exact same day every year. So this informs a lot of my work, hugely informs my work with clients no matter what we're doing. Like if it's business, we're talking about, okay, we're in the fourth quarter. We all live and die in the fourth quarter. We're harvesting, we're reaping what we have sown. Let's drill down and do some analytics. Let's look at your year-to-dates, income and expenses. What are the income streams and the outflows? And then why? What do we remember? Some of it's politics, some of it's weather, and then some of it's astrological transits, some of it's your competitor had a better idea, that sort of thing. And then also another thing I'm really big on is surveys. If you're self-employed, survey your peers. Who are they? What do they charge? Why do they charge that? Do they get something different from the money than you provide? How are you special and different? How are you not? That kind of thing. If you're employed by somebody else and you're punching a clock, could I get a better deal somewhere else? And would it be worth it to even try? Because sometimes there's no better anywhere. You're at the top of the pile, and sometimes you're not. But this is a good time to look, and that sort of thing, before you move into the dark time of winter and start making your plans for the next year. Does that make sense? Any questions? Perfect. Okay, what do we have next? Oh yeah, now comes this is where we get granular. There's two things really there's three things that astrology gives us, I think. One of them is it is an outline of your soul's path. It's said to reflect your covenant with God or whoever you believe. And then what you were thinking when you decided to come here this time. Because we all had a plan. Yeah, laugh. Yes, thank you. Thank you. This is where I want to cue in McFarlane's The Fog of War, because no matter how good of intentions it's the exact same, it's the thing, it's the same thing. No matter what good intentions we had, no matter how much we loved, no matter how much confidence we had, no matter how ready we were, how long it had been since we had been here before, you deploy, you drop in, and within minutes, something goes sideways. It does not go the way you thought. And so we all have those days where it was just like, why am I here? And what am I supposed to be doing with the days and the hours? And astrology will help you reground into that. And then also, depending on the need, and a number of factors. It will also help inform whatever past life regressions you're doing, because the birth chart will tell you a lot about what happened before that informed those certainties that inform the decision. Does that make sense? Yeah. So first of all, it's one of the most helpful things to make peace with who you are as a soul this time, and why you're special and different from other people, and why certain things are easy for you and other things are hard, and vice versa. So it's a way of reframing. So no, it's less judgy. It's so important that we be able to stand and be seen by ourselves and others and not judged. And that's a stage that everything else is sound. Okay, so then the next thing is archetypes. The 12 signs are said to be 12 different archetypes, and I definitely believe that. And from a business perspective, when you're doing strengths-based coaching, or you're trying to build your own team of Marvel Comics superheroes, everybody's got a gift. And this is also really helpful with bridging some of those family gaps around caring for an elder. Right now in our family, we had a niece who is the queen of logistics. She's better than any of her cousins and siblings, and she's way better than any of the adults. By the same token, we've got two others off to the side who can be counted on to throw the match on the gasoline. And so so you don't give them responsibilities. You don't, there's no impulse control there and really bad judgment. You ask the logistics queen to do the logistics, and yes, she's a Virgo. Yeah. Virgo, Capricorn, you Earth girls, man, we love you. You make the rest of the world bearable for the rest of us. You make the trains run on time. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and so then, speaking of time, astrology gives us a sense of when is good to do things and when is not good to do things. Saturn transits are famous for education and learning and contraction. You often don't learn, or you don't earn as much during major Saturn transits, but you are skill building for a huge breakthrough with like a raise in a promotion or a new branding that brings different stuff. The third house and the sign of Gemini rules siblings. And so a lot of what we choose to do with our aging siblings, again, depends on our karma with them, what we owe them. And one of the things I'm seeing in spades now that the boomers generation has passed, and we're the wise elders of the tribe, for better or for worse, is like, what do I do with my bipolar sister or my brother with the opiate addiction, or both, and you want to be clear on what you owe them, and again, past life regressions, therapy, different kinds of things, journeying will help with that. You also have to be really clear on your resources. Like what I hear so many of our generation saying is like, golly, if I had money, I would just put her in rehab, or I would help her get into affordable housing or something like that. If I didn't have to work, if I wasn't raising my kid or putting my kid through college, if I had that kind of time and energy, I could consider being more helpful, but I don't have those resources. And so how do I just show up from a place of love and make sure that I'm articulating that? And it doesn't mean they're going to hear it, but back to business and advertising and marketing, timed, spaced, repetition of information. You say this, you get your talking points and you just say it over and over and over again. Or like we did with mamas when they had dementia. It's like you just get your talking points and you just say, or raising kids. Yeah. So that gets complicated. But it's the path after, isn't it? After the parents go. Yeah. And it's often harder.
It's more complicated.
It's certainly more complicated. Yeah. Is there anything in specific that it's really hard work, and there are ways in which it's unsatisfying, Was just talking with a client about that last week, where it's like, this gets back to the love that pre-existed this lifetime. We love so much. And the Venus placement in your birth chart will tell you a lot about the love that motivated you here. And what I see a lot for our generation, people, we're kind of the, I call it Camelot's children, you know, because we're not really boomers. We're not really Gen X. It's the Kennedy years from like basically 1959 to when he passed in 64. And, there's heavy duty Venus Neptune. And Neptune is the most exalted in terms of spiritual love. And also on a bad day, it rules in theogens, and the confusion that happens. Think about bad drunk decisions. That's Neptune, Venus. A lot of us chose to come in this life from that generation and others, but that in particular from a deep place of love and excitement. Oh, golly, I hadn't seen him in 500 years. This has been great. You know, we had so much fun before. And it's like, but they've got issues. And I didn't plan for that. And so now I'm having to pivot. And it can take a lot to forgive yourself and find new ways to show up. And then also, again, the promise, the future covenant. It's like, hey, I love you, and I would really like for us to have this be better, but I'm at the limits of what I can do right now in this lifetime with what you've got going on. And
a lovely,
or those of us with siblings who are troubled have children of their own. Technically, it's their problem. It's not mine.
exactly.
Some of us have siblings who are childless, and that poses a whole other, yeah. Hopefully they've married well. And yeah.
Flipping,
Yeah.
there'll be a trans.
The next thing I love a lot is EMDR. It's a particular kind of psychotherapy. When it was first invented in the late 80s, it was only used for the most extreme trauma. Rape victims, kidnapping survivors, veterans, that kind of thing. And then as time has gone on, the amount of research on this is amazing. It reworks your neural pathways in much the same way that psilocybin does and other medicines. And so this is really helpful in emergencies, because a lot of times when you're in a crisis, you're so upset about the crisis, you're not making good decisions about the crisis, and then you're not making the crisis better. And so I'm a big fan of getting into there quickly right away so that we can dial down the emotion. We can help you get more back reconnected with your strengths and your sense of agency and the resources that are around you to help you solve problems and get the pain out of it. And then it does also create lasting change. And that is something that is really important. And I can't say this enough. One of the biggest, the psychedelic community and the psychotherapeutic community share some of the same criticisms, that our behavior doesn't change in a way that's noticeable to others. And so one of the things we're always needing to make sure that we're clear on and that we can articulate, especially if someone can't see it, it's like, hey, I did change. And that's also where that journaling, the reviewing and revising the journals is a key component. Those two things used in tandem is really helpful and powerful. And so is the past life regressions, because a lot of what we're coming in on is the therapy is really good for this life, but most of us stop at this life, and there is so much more going on. And it's helpful to know. So now, then we add in the fun stuff. There's a lot of substances out there. There's a lot of different applications. And again, for me, it's a lot like the other different healing modalities. different things work for different people, different things work for different situations, different things work for different people at different times of their lives. And so I think it's really important to be open-minded, look for the synchronicities, but then also listen to your gut and your heart and have discernment around what you take, where you get it, how you work with it. Facilitators. We're blessed here to have a lot of facilitators, and we've had that for a long time, but a lot of them have different levels of training and ethical boundaries, ethics, morals, ethics. Yeah. And so, so there's that. Like I said, I am particularly fond of MDMA for a couple of reasons. One was I was doing a lot of LSD and psilocybin in high school and college, and this was, again, before facilitators, but I got to this pocket of deep pain that I could never move and never shift. And about the time I was like, hey, this isn't fun, and I need to stop doing this, the woman who became my mother-in-law, who was a psychotherapist, started studying it and was one of the first people I ever know who took it. And so I feel really blessed and lucky that my first exposures to it were, she didn't facilitate, but Thanksgiving dinner conversations got real interesting at her house. Like, I learned a lot about what the psychotherapeutic community was thinking about it and saying about it before I ever took it. And then it was, I feel like I went in with more education, so I was able to get more out of it and resolve some of those pockets of pain. And then, long story short, that marriage and mother-in-law went away, and my current husband studied chemistry under one of Sasha Shulgin's proteges. And right. I could have scripted that. Yeah, maybe that was part of my covenant. Yeah. And so we were kind of in on the ground floor of some things, and it came to us at a time that was perfect. And so then we started experimenting, and then started getting involved in the psychedelic community here, and in the early stages of the entheogens group with Jacqueline Lopez and Michael. Yeah. She was the one I dealt with most because at the time he was struggling. His cancer was back or something, and it was, but that group and that wealth of knowledge, I think, saved his life. And that's huge. And so, anywho, for me, what I love about this substance is it gives you a laser. The analogy for me is laser surgery. It gives you the ability to go in after specific things, especially during certain transits over time. Some of the long transits that, like your Saturn return, that's like 3 years. Crooks. It's ultimately awesome because Saturn is the Lord of karma. He brings you your covenant on a plate, but good Lord, it's never what you thought, and you thought you handled, but little you knew you thought you handled already. And were we done? Aren't we done? No. Okay. Back to arguing with dead people. It's, yeah, you don't win. You can buy time, but anywho, between. If you're using just MDMA, you can be very targeted in your topics that you want to address. You can be very systematic in your approach. And if you sequence it and you use the MAPS integration, I'm a big fan of the MAPS integration. You'll talk about that. You can get there faster than straight therapy or EMDR therapy. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to skip to a couple of things. There are a couple of things There's a couple of things that I do very differently, again, because I come to this work with a different tool bag. Because I've studied so many different religions, and because I've had the benefit of also studying under the shamans of a couple of different specific cultures, there's things that I have in a total Gemini eclectic way kind of patched together that I find extraordinary. And one of them is a series of prayers and invocations. I like to start with a specific prayer. I got part of it from one shaman, part of it from another shaman, and part of it from a spirit guide when I was flat on my back for the better part of a year and just like talking to dead people, because you can only binge watch so much Netflix. It gets old. But basically I like to call in everybody. Your guides, your guardians, your angels, your ancestors, the spirits of the land upon which you live, the spirits of the lands of your ancestors, the devas, the minihuni, the whatever, the spirits of the lands that are special to you. I love Hawaii. I don't have any ancestral thing there. I don't have any past life stuff there, but nonetheless, I talk to that land too, because it brings me grace all the time. And so you basically call everybody in and you share the medicine with them. You share the medicine with them, especially your ancestors, especially the troubled and the criminal, because or just the depressed, for a lot of us, especially women, we are the end of thousands of years of poor depressed women. Sharecroppers, crofters, people from the potato famine, dire poverty, the Industrial Revolution, the shirtwaist triangle factory. Women struggled. And Freud called it hysteria, but it's way more than that. And for those of us who have struggled with different kinds of depression at different times, when it's up, it can be very effective to call in the matriarchal lines and just say, hey, let's do a blitzkrieg on this and just see what you can shift, because you can shift a lot that way. And then there's more open communication lines and there's more help going back and forth. There's a saying in hospice: the living help the dead help the dead help the living, and the living help the living. It's like box breathing, we're all still connected. It's just that we live in different zip codes, so to speak. And so I really believe in not only inviting everybody in, but inviting them to share the medicine and to share the journey and to do this together, especially in times of mission critical family drama. Don't fail to add that in. It's like, okay, just put my sister back in rehab, man. Help me. Yeah. Help me with this. Help me find the root of it. Help me to unhook whatever we can unhook, so we can at least be more comfortable with this and not have to do it again. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. There's two things that I also like to do, especially when you're trying to get certain kinds of things. One of them is what they call a cast out or a cast away, where and the one I use sounds a lot like a legal document, where it's including but not limited to, self-sabotage, low self-esteem, other projections that people have put on me, everything that's not me, everything that I've outgrown, that kind of stuff, where you're literally asking for help on the medicine, jettisoning your baggage, whatever you can get rid of that day. And then by the same token, because nature abhors a vacuum, you do what they call a callback. And this comes from ancient Africa. The castaway and callback is a part of a lot of different cultures. I heard of it from a South African shaman, a Sangoma. And so then you call back all the grace, all the goodness, all the good qualities, all the health and wellness, all the psychological functioning. whatever is appropriate for you. And again, this is one of those things, if I thought about bringing it and then it was like, no, I'm not going to do it. If you want it, email me and I will send it to you. I mean, my business cards are all over and my email will be up there. The last piece is the integration piece. And sometimes this is different from time to time, and it took me a long time to land on this, but I really do like the MAPS protocol of working with some sort of therapist or facilitator once a week for weeks afterwards. And then also, if the person has the capacity to do EMDR, then you can blast through more faster. Again, between my natal chart with all the freaking fire and then the fact that I do so much crisis management. People don't call me when everything's groovy or when they've got time to mess around. It's usually mission critical in DEFCON 2. And so I've learned to find the shortcut, find the fast track. It's not always as comfortable, but it's roughly akin to ripping the Band-Aid off first or fast, because, and then hopefully with that intention, we not only solve the problem and get the donkey out of the ditch, but we cannot do this again. We can learn from our issues and our mistakes and make a new one next time. And the end. Thank you. Oh.
Like,